In this video, I want to share with you the 7 mistakes that I see beginner Russian learners make. And I want you to know these so that you can avoid them, because that will save you so much time, effort, and frustration. And you'll be able to become fluent in Russian much faster. Давайте начнем с первой ошибки. So the first mistake that I see people make is people saying that, all right, so I've been learning Russian now for 3 months, 6 months, a year, and I recently met a native speaker, like just out somewhere, and I tried to have a conversation, and it just did not go anywhere. And then we're like, so the first thing, how did you learn Russian? Like, wow, I installed Duolingo, and then, like, yeah, that's where it went wrong. Duolingo is a great application to get a quick overview for the Russian language, but like use it for 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks max. And then afterwards, you need to go for something more structured, because Duolingo alone is not going to be enough. Same thing goes for most of the other apps. At a certain point, you just want to follow a solid course that has a solid progression. Talking about progression, this is going to be the second mistake that I see people make. And let me just tell you a short story of an acquaintance of mine. He really wanted to learn Russian a couple of years ago because he had a Russian-speaking wife, and I think he still does. I just haven't spoken to him for a couple of years. And he was very motivated. He was stoked, smart IT guy. And he went to lessons in the Netherlands, and he told me this later, that the teacher, she was like, in the first lesson, he's like, all right, so Russian has 6 cases, which meaning that each noun changes its ending depending on the function in the sentence, and it has 6 different endings. And then there are also adjectives which have different endings for masculine, feminine, neuter, and plural nouns. So that's like 24 different endings you'll need to remember. Oh, apart from that, there's also conjugations, meaning that every single Russian verb you're going to learn has so many different endings depending on who is performing the action. And at the first lesson, if you hear something like that, of course you're going to be overwhelmed. You're going to be like, wow, Russian is more difficult than I thought. Maybe all the rumors of Russian being the most difficult language on the planet are actually true. And so he went to these lessons for a couple of weeks, and then afterwards he quit because it was just too much. And I heard that and I felt so sad, because this is the exact opposite of what I recommend and of how I actually learned Russian, because I never took any formal lessons, and the courses that I followed, they introduce grammar very, very, very gradually with a good progression, meaning that like in the first month or so, I only knew about the nominative, accusative, and prepositional case. And this made it so much easier, because if someone would have started talking to me about the genitive case with lots of exceptions and plural nouns, and I would have been like, whoa, this is difficult, and I need to say all this correctly in order for native speakers to understand, I might have quit as well. So make sure you follow a gradual progression. Oh, and talking about that last point, if you make mistakes with the cases, Russian speakers will completely understand what you say. Like, even if you say "Я говорю мамы" instead of "Я говорю маме." The first "Я говорю мамы" is like I'm telling of mom. "Я говорю маме" is like I'm telling to mom. Like, the words in the sentence will already make it so clear that you're telling something to your mom. So I'm a little bit hesitant to say, like, don't care about the cases in the beginning, because it is important after a certain point, like upper beginner, intermediate level, that you do start saying them correctly in order to avoid sounding like a little kid or like a caveman. But at the same time, in the beginning stages, like, they don't really matter that much. All right. So the third mistake that I see make, and this is also something I see a lot of Russian speakers make when they try to learn Dutch. And this is that people think that for some reason, I don't know why, when you start speaking in another language, you need to have the perfect pronunciation from the start. And this is madness, because your pronunciation will get better over time as you get better in the language. As you listen to more spoken Russian, your accent itself will get better. Like, I sometimes listen back to videos of mine and I see, like, oh, I still make mistakes. Like, I say "e" instead of "ui." And this is something very common for lots of native English speakers, or for speakers from Western language. You just don't hear the difference between the "ui" and the "e" in the beginning. Same thing, like, for example, the soft sign makes a letter softer. Like, in the beginning, I often said a hard "l" when it was supposed to be a "l." And this is stuff that will get better over time. Like, it really doesn't matter. Like, think about yourself. How many migrants do you know, or people who just come from a different background, who live in your native country, who speak your native language with an accent, and you still understand what they mean? You perfectly understand well what they mean. So the fourth mistake that I see people make is they send me a message saying like, all right, so I'm doing everything well. I'm watching series, I'm listening to audio courses, I'm doing an app for learning vocabulary, but I still cannot speak. And I'm like, maybe that's because you're lacking the most important part of actually becoming fluent in Russian. You need to actually speak. You need to practice speaking. You need to have conversation. It's kind of like watching, like, example, you want to learn how to drive, but the only thing you're doing is watching Formula One and reading a theory book about how to behave on the road, but you're never actually sitting behind a steering wheel and actually driving around town. So of course, you're never going to be able to actually drive. And this is similar, and I completely understand why this is such an issue, because actually, like, if you want to learn grammar, you can do that from the comfort of your own home. If you want to learn vocabulary, you can have some flashcards, either on your phone or in real life. You can just do that while sitting on the couch. If you want to improve your listening skills, you can listen to music or watch series. I'm putting them up there because I got my projector there. But actually speaking, this is not something that I cannot right now decide, all right, I want to have a conversation, because with whom am I going to do that? You cannot materialize a Russian speaker out of thin air. I mean, I suppose you could do that online, but still, you need to go through a process. You need to vet your teacher. You need to see if you match, if you have a connection. And this makes, it's also, there's quite some fear and discomfort involved. You know, like, you need to put yourself out there on the line. You've been learning for a while. And once you actually try to have conversation, it's going to be like, wait, this is more difficult than I thought. But at the same time, this is the most important part. If you're not doing this, you're never actually going to be speaking. So there's a couple of ways that you can practice speaking. The first one, the most obvious, which I suppose most of you have already tried, is that you simply think about where could there be native speakers around? Maybe someone in your family, friend, or acquaintance or colleague speaks Russian, and you can occasionally speak with them. And this is a great option. If you don't have anyone like that, there's a couple of other options which I recommend. First of all, you can find a tutor online, or a practice or a language exchange partner. And this is great because it will help you to just practice speaking while online. And another thing that I highly recommend is record yourself speaking. Just take out your phone, press audio record, and just for 30 seconds speak about something. I don't know, just say, "Я сижу на диване." I'm sitting on the couch. There's so many different things you can try. So another type of email that I sometimes get is when people say like, all right, I'm watching Russian series and it's just not working. And I'm like, well, first of all, great that you started watching Russian series, because this is a great thing to like passively increase your knowledge of the Russian language. But why is it not working? And then they tell me that they read somewhere or they heard from someone online that watching with English subtitles is a waste of time. And then I'm like, how can you enjoy watching something in Russian if you only understand 5 or 10% of what's being said? Like, you're going to miss the plot. Like, you watch something for a couple of minutes, you're like, I don't understand anything. And it's not going to be a fun experience. So in the beginning stages, later on you can change this. In the beginning stages, just watch with English subtitles. This will still be incredibly valuable for you because, first of all, it will allow you to actually spend a lot of time watching things because you actually understand what's going on, which is very important. And then because it's a passive learning, like, you think you're just enjoying yourself, but at the same time, your brain is absorbing so much knowledge of the Russian language that it's going to be very valuable for you. Plus, you're allowing your ears to get used to the Russian language. Like, you're learning where the right stresses need to be. And there's so many times when I'm just speaking Russian and like some random word just pops up. And I'm like, where did I learn this word? And like, I just heard it a couple times while watching series or while watching comedians. And this is such a cool experience to have. So another issue I see with people who want to learn Russian is that they're so motivated in the beginning and they're like, all right, I really want to learn Russian. I want to become fluent as fast as possible. I'm really going after this. And this is great. This is great to have this motivation. But then they're like, all right, so I'm going to spend like an hour doing your course every day. Then I'm going to spend half an hour learning vocabulary. Then another hour watching series. And then another hour speaking with native speakers. And like, whoa, take it back. It's going to be like half of your day already. Like, it's good to be motivated, but I recommend toning it down a little bit, because what happens when people are so motivated to do everything like that, often they might do it for a short period of time, a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks. And they're like, I cannot combine this with the rest of my life. I also got work, studies, family, friends, sports, hobbies, etc. So tone it down. If you're just starting to learn Russian, take something between like 10 and 30 minutes and spend that on that. First, get into the habit. And once you're in the habit of learning Russian, like every day, most days, you can skip some days occasionally, but try to make it something that you do on a daily-ish basis. And then if you do this for a month, for a couple of months, you'll find that the habit is there. And from that point, you'll probably start to want to really spend more time on your Russian. And that's the time when you can start putting in 1 hour, 2 hour, maybe more if your time on that given day allows it. So start off slow, 10, 20, 30 minutes a day, and just gradually make it more. Okay, so the last mistake that I see is when people send me an email and they're like, all right, so I'm doing everything well. It's just not working. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. And then I ask them, did you sign up for my course, Russian Conversations Unlocked yet? And they're like, no, not yet. And I'm like, well, then that's the first thing to start with if you're currently struggling learning Russian. Check out the link in the description. Спасибо вам огромное за просмотр. Пока.